Think you understand women from other cultures just because you've watched some movies or read a few articles online? I'm about to share 5 facts about foreign women that will completely change how you think about international dating. And trust me, these aren't the stereotypes you've heard 1,000 times. Hey everyone, Julia here. And after years of traveling, living abroad, and actually talking to women from dozens of countries, I've learned some fascinating truths that most people never discover. These insights go way deeper than the surface level stuff. And if you're curious about international relationships or just want to understand the world better, stick around. Let's dive in. The first fascinating fact that most people don't realize is that women in many foreign countries are actually far more traditional than Western media would have you believe, but not in the way you think. When I say traditional, I'm not talking about being submissive or old-fashioned. I'm talking about a completely different value system that prioritizes family, community, and long-term thinking over individual gratification and instant pleasure. This distinction is absolutely crucial to understand. Let me give you a real example. I have a friend from the Philippines named Maria, who's a successful accountant, speaks 3 languages fluently, and manages her family's investment properties. By any measure, she's a modern, educated, independent woman. But when I asked her about her dating life, she told me something that really stuck with me. She said she would never seriously date a man unless she could see him fitting into her family and unless her family approved of him. Not because she needs permission, but because family harmony is so important to her sense of well-being that she wouldn't choose a partner who disrupted it. This pattern repeats across Latin America, Asia, Eastern Europe, and many other regions. Women might have careers, education, and independence, but they still place family at the center of their decision-making in ways that would seem foreign to many Western women raised in individualistic cultures. They're thinking about how a potential partner will treat their parents, whether he'll be a good father, and how he'll contribute to the extended family unit. This isn't backwards thinking, it's just a different framework for what matters in life. What's particularly interesting is how this affects dating dynamics. In cultures where family and community matter more than individual desires, women are often much more selective up front because the stakes are higher. They're not just choosing someone to have fun with, they're potentially choosing someone who will become part of their family network forever. This means first dates often involve deeper conversations about values, family, and life goals rather than just surface-level small talk. I've seen this create beautiful relationships where Western men who value family and stability find partners who share those values deeply, not just intellectually, but as a core part of their identity. If you're someone who's tired of dating cultures where nobody wants to talk about the future and everyone's just keeping things casual indefinitely, this traditional mindset can actually be incredibly refreshing. It's not about losing independence, it's about building something bigger than just 2 people hanging out. The second fact that surprises most people is that women from foreign countries often have completely different standards of masculinity than what you see promoted in Western media. In many cultures, the hyper-aggressive, dominant, never show weakness version of masculinity that gets pushed so hard in Western dating advice is actually seen as insecure and unattractive. Let me explain what I mean by this because it's nuanced and really important. I was in Colombia last year, and I got to know several local women who were dating both Colombian men and foreign men. One woman named Daniela told me something fascinating. She said Colombian women want strong men, but strength means something different than most foreign men think. She said real strength is being confident enough to be vulnerable, being secure enough to show affection publicly, being powerful enough that you don't need to constantly prove it. The guys who were always posturing, never admitting mistakes, and acting overly dominant were seen as weak and insecure, not strong. This pattern shows up across so many cultures. In Thailand, men who can stay calm under pressure and never raise their voices are respected far more than men who are loud and aggressive. The concept of keeping face and maintaining harmony is seen as the ultimate show of self-control and strength. In Russia and Ukraine, women value men who are cultured, well-read, and emotionally expressive. They want partners who can discuss literature, appreciate arts, and aren't afraid to show deep feelings. The stoic, tough guy who never shows emotion isn't appealing. He's just seen as emotionally stunted. What I find particularly fascinating is how physical strength and toughness rank compared to other masculine qualities in many foreign cultures. Yes, women everywhere appreciate a man who can protect and provide, but in many places that's about competence and capability rather than physical dominance. A man who knows how to navigate bureaucracy, who has good relationships with important people, who can solve problems cleverly, who has skills and knowledge, these things often matter much more than how much you can bench press or how aggressive you can be. This has huge implications for international dating. Many Western men who feel like they can't compete in their local dating markets because they're not tall enough, muscular enough, or alpha enough, discover that in other cultures, their intelligence, emotional depth, and practical competence are much more valued. I've seen so many relationships work beautifully because the man brought qualities that are undervalued in Western dating, but highly prized in other cultures. The practical side of this is that emotional intelligence and communication skills become much more important in international relationships. If you can express yourself clearly, if you can be vulnerable and authentic, if you can navigate cultural differences with patience and curiosity rather than frustration and judgment, you're going to have much better success than someone who just tries to be dominant and controlling. Foreign women are looking for genuine partners, not someone playing a role of what he thinks a man should be. The third fact that consistently surprises people is that language barriers are often much less of an obstacle than you'd expect, and sometimes they're actually beneficial in the early stages of relationships. This sounds counterintuitive, but let me walk you through why this happens and what I've observed across countless international couples. When you're dating someone who doesn't speak your language fluently, or you're learning theirs, something interesting happens to communication. You can't rely on clever wordplay, sarcasm, subtle hints, or any of the indirect communication patterns that create so much confusion and drama in relationships. You have to be direct, clear, and genuine because that's all that works when there's a language gap. This forces a level of authentic communication that many couples never achieve even when they speak the same language perfectly. I watched this play out with a friend of mine named Tom, who's from the US and married to a woman from Vietnam named Lynn. In the early days of their relationship, Lynn's English was basic, and Tom knew maybe 10 words in Vietnamese, but he told me those were some of the best months of their relationship because everything had to be said simply and directly. If he was upset about something, he couldn't be passive-aggressive or expect her to read between the lines. He had to say clearly what bothered him. If she needed something, she had to ask directly. There was no room for games or manipulation, just honest, straightforward communication. What's also fascinating is how much you can communicate without words when you're forced to. International couples often develop a deeper understanding of nonverbal communication, body language, tone, and energy. They learn to read each other in ways that go beyond words. They become more attuned to facial expressions, physical gestures, and emotional states. This creates a different kind of intimacy that's based on genuine presence and attention, rather than just verbal exchange. Now, I'm not saying language barriers don't create challenges, because of course they do. Important conversations about finances, future plans, family issues, these things require clear communication, and sometimes that means learning each other's languages or working with translation tools. But what I've consistently seen is that couples who navigate language barriers successfully often end up with stronger communication skills overall because they've had to work harder at it from the beginning. There's also something romantic and bonding about learning a language together or teaching each other your languages. I've watched couples create their own unique blend of languages, mixing words from both and creating private jokes and terms that only they understand. This shared language becomes part of their unique relationship identity. Some of the most touching moments I've witnessed in international relationships involve partners trying to express deep feelings in each other's languages, stumbling over words but conveying everything through the effort and emotion behind it. The practical advice here is don't let language barriers scare you away from potentially amazing connections. Yes, you'll need patience and humor and willingness to work at communication, but those challenges often bring couples closer rather than driving them apart. The key is approaching it with curiosity and playfulness rather than frustration. Learn some basic phrases in her language. Encourage her to practice yours. Use technology when you need to. And remember that connection goes deeper than vocabulary. The fourth fact that blows people's minds is that women from many foreign countries have fundamentally different attitudes toward femininity and gender roles, and it has nothing to do with being oppressed or brainwashed. This is probably the most controversial point I'll make, but stay with me because the reality is much more interesting than the stereotypes. I've had countless conversations with women from countries like Ukraine, the Philippines, Colombia, Thailand, and many others about femininity and gender roles. What consistently surprises Western observers is that many of these women genuinely enjoy traditional feminine roles and actively choose them. Not because they're forced to, but because their culture hasn't taught them that being feminine or taking care of home and family is somehow lesser or degrading. Let me share a conversation I had with a Ukrainian woman named Katerina, who's a dentist in Kyiv. She makes good money, owns her apartment, and is completely financially independent. But she told me that when she's in a relationship, she loves cooking for her partner. She enjoys making her home beautiful and comfortable, and she takes pride in being nurturing and supportive. She said Western feminism often seemed to suggest that these things make her weak or oppressed, but she finds them empowering because she's choosing them and she's good at them. This perspective is incredibly common in many cultures. Women see creating a beautiful home, cooking delicious meals, being nurturing and supportive, and taking care of family as valuable skills and sources of pride, not as degrading chores they're forced into. At the same time, many of these same women have careers and education. It's not either or, it's both. They're not choosing between being capable and being feminine. They're integrating both. What's particularly interesting is how this affects relationship dynamics. In many foreign cultures, there's a clear but flexible division of responsibilities where both partners contribute, but in different ways. The expectation isn't that everything has to be split 50-50 down the middle in some mathematical calculation. It's that both partners bring value in their own ways, and together they create something neither could alone. I've seen this create incredibly functional relationships where there's less tension and resentment about who's doing what, because both partners are playing to their strengths and preferences rather than trying to prove ideological points. The woman might do most of the cooking because she's good at it and enjoys it, while the man handles finances and home repairs, or whatever division works for that specific couple based on their individual skills and preferences. Now, I want to be crystal clear here. I'm not saying traditional gender roles are better or that women should be in the kitchen barefoot and pregnant. I'm saying that in many cultures, there's less shame around choosing traditionally feminine roles and less pressure to reject them to prove your worth. Women have more freedom to be feminine without being told they're betraying other women or holding back progress. That freedom to choose is what actually matters. For men dating internationally, understanding this is crucial. Many foreign women aren't looking for relationships where you split every task and every check exactly in half to prove you're equals. They assume equality but express it differently. They want partners who will fulfill traditionally masculine roles while they fulfill traditionally feminine ones, and they see this complementary dynamic as creating balance rather than inequality. If you can appreciate and honor what she brings without trying to make her more like Western women, these relationships work beautifully. The fifth and final fact that most people never realize is that foreign women often have incredibly different attitudes toward money and material wealth than what you see in Western consumer culture. This is subtle, but really important for understanding what makes international relationships work or fail. Let me explain the nuances here because it's easy to misunderstand. I've lived in countries where people earn a fraction of what Americans or Europeans make, but they're genuinely happy and fulfilled in ways that wealthy Westerners often aren't. The women I've met in these places aren't materialistic in the Western sense, where they need the latest everything and where their self-worth is tied to what they own. But they are practical about money because they've lived with real scarcity and they understand that money represents security and opportunity. I remember talking with a Filipino woman named Grace who was dating an American man. She told me something profound. She said in the Philippines, money isn't about keeping up with neighbors or showing off. It's about making sure your family has food, that your children can go to school, that you're not one emergency away from disaster. She said when she looks for a partner, yes, she cares about his ability to provide, but not so she can buy designer handbags. She cares because she wants to know her children will be okay and her aging parents will be cared for. This practical approach to money creates very different relationship dynamics than in cultures where consumerism and status-seeking dominate. Women from modest backgrounds in foreign countries often have different priorities than Western women from similar economic circumstances. They value security and stability over luxury and status. They'd rather have a partner who saves money wisely than one who spends lavishly to impress others. They appreciate experiences and family time more than material possessions. What this means practically is that your money goes much further in terms of appreciation and impact. If you're a Western man with a modest but stable income, you might struggle to impress women in your local dating market who are comparing you to other men and finding you average. But in many foreign countries, that same stable income represents security and opportunity that's genuinely valued. Not because women are gold diggers, but because they understand what stability means when you've lived without it. I've also noticed that women from countries with less consumer culture often make better financial partners because they're not constantly spending money to fill emotional voids or keep up appearances. They know how to make a little go a long way. They can cook amazing meals from basic ingredients. They can create beautiful homes without spending fortunes. They find happiness in simple pleasures that don't cost money. These skills and attitudes create partnerships where money stress is reduced because both people are aligned on what actually matters. The flip side of this that's important to understand is that family financial obligations are often more significant in many foreign cultures. Women might need to send money home to help parents or siblings. They might need to contribute to family emergencies or celebrations. This isn't her being used or taken advantage of, it's cultural expectations around family that she takes seriously. Understanding and respecting these obligations is crucial for international relationships to work. You're not just partnering with her, you're becoming part of a family network with responsibilities and benefits. What I find beautiful about this different relationship with money is how it refocuses relationships on what actually creates happiness and connection. When you're with someone who doesn't need constant spending to be happy, who finds joy in simple moments, who values experiences over possessions, life becomes richer in ways that have nothing to do with bank accounts. I've seen couples travel the world on modest budgets, create beautiful homes for little money, and raise happy children without the crushing pressure of keeping up with consumer culture. For men considering international dating, being honest about your financial situation while demonstrating stability and responsibility matters much more than trying to appear wealthy. Foreign women are often incredibly perceptive about authenticity. They'd rather know what they're getting into honestly than be impressed with illusions that fall apart later. Show that you're responsible with money, that you plan for the future, that you can provide security even if not luxury, and you'll find that this matters more than the number in your bank account. So there you have it, 5 fascinating facts about foreign women that go way beyond the stereotypes. They're more traditional, but in empowering ways that prioritize family and community. They have different standards of masculinity that value emotional intelligence alongside strength. Language barriers can actually improve communication and intimacy. They embrace femininity without seeing it as weakness. And they have healthier relationships with money that focus on security and substance over consumerism and status. Understanding these realities opens up possibilities for genuine connection across cultures that most people never explore. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time where we continue exploring what makes international relationships so fascinating and fulfilling.